Welcome to News9 Mediaverse, and you are watching On Point with me. Today, I will tell you about the man behind the biggest attack on Israel. I will also tell you how Hamas was able to beat sophisticated Israeli security infrastructure. But the first, who is Mohammed Daif? And let me tell you that the man who is behind this attack, Mohammed Daif, is so elusive that only 3 pictures are available. Let me take you through the details of this elusive man. And in the course of it, I will tell you the latest revelations which have come from Israel as to how they were able to circumvent the intelligence. First, we'll stay on this. Mohammed Daif is the military commander of Hamas, and Hamas is inspired from Muslim Brotherhood, the original and the oldest and longest running Islamic insurgency. He heads the military wing of Hamas. Hamas has multiple wings. So he is heading the military wing. Mohammed Daif. Daif heads the Hamas Al-Qassam Brigade. That is the name of it. He has been pictured only thrice. There are only 3 pictures available of him, once in his 20s. But his real name is Mohammed Masri. And Mohammed Masri, whose Daif lost his family. His whereabouts today are unknown. His only family died in Gaza bombing. He was arrested in 1989. He spent 16 months behind bars. He planned the attack with Yahya Sinwar. So this Hamas operation with Yahya Sinwar, who is the leader of Hamas in Gaza. So there are 2 people. That's where Israeli intelligence is pointed at. Now, how Hamas broke into the Israeli infrastructure. Israel's security system made big mistakes. These are the revelations which have been reported from Reuters to New York Times to multiple newspapers in the West. Intelligence did detect surge in activity on Gaza network. This is a fact. The warning was not acted upon. Drones destroyed remote controlled guns and surveillance cameras. Drones disabled cell network on border. Israeli soldiers were shot dead on beds. They couldn't just get up because they were not aware of the action which was happening. Clustering of commanders in a single border base. Another tactical mistake. This is something very important. I'll tell you about it later. How 2 brigade commanders met, could not get in touch with Tel Aviv. And they said, okay, you take care of this hamlet and I will go and take care of the another hamlet. Very important. This has been reported by Reuters also. Israel focus remained on Lebanese border. There was a meeting which took place a couple of days back. So when the biggest threats were discussed, the Gaza was not discussed. The issues of Lebanese border was discussed. Number of troops on border were reduced. Some of them went to West Bank, but the fact of the matter is there was over-reliance on the surveillance instrument. Because they felt automated systems would work, subterranean wall would work because that will take care of the tunnels. So automated systems failed. Control rooms remained clueless. Let me tell you what, we'll stay on this. These control rooms were behind the barbed wire. But when the intervention happened on the side of the Hamas, the control room was not aware that they were being overrun. 1,500 terrorists searched through 30 points. Aditya, 30 points on border. 1,500 terrorists from 30 points, and the security was taken unaware. Hamas broke the barriers. It was noticed very late. Tel Aviv was not in control in the initial hours, and let me explain this. Wires have reported that when the brigade, the commanders were speaking to each other, there was no direction coming in from the control room, which means that the local commanders for example, the colonel in Indian Army, the decision making was localized. So there was not a joint command control room which was directing them. And this has been confirmed. The 2 brigade commanders met on the way which a complex army operation wouldn't have allowed. So it tells us how Hamas carried out the attack, where the state failed, and who Mohammed Daif is. So first let's talk about Hamas. And I'm joined by Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, Major Don Pfefferman. Thank you so much for joining me again. And our Executive Editor, Aditya Raj Kaul. So first I'll go to Aditya. Aditya, define Hamas for us. You know, the way Hamas has been able to carry out these attacks, it just goes on to show that somehow a part of the Hamas was working, rest, gave the impression that they are clueless and they could organize it so much. And why this gentleman remains untraced?
You know, first things first, Hamas's, ultimate objective, Kartikeya, is to wipe out and eradicate Israel. That is their ultimate goal. So there is no two ways about it. So they have been considerably working for last several years. They are the de facto government there. They say they have been elected in Gaza. And this particular person, Mohammed Daif, that you are mentioning, is an elusive figure. He is a shadowy figure. He hasn't been seen much. Only in official records, he has been photographed only 3 times. He has spent about 16 months behind bars when he was arrested for the first time in 1989, if I'm not wrong. And since then, nobody knows his location. Is he in Qatar? Is he in some other Middle Eastern country? Or is he in fact in Gaza? But what we are also talking about today is about the massive, massive intelligence failure. Kartikeya, I'm just arriving in the studio from the Israel embassy. I had a very important 40 minutes conversation with the Israeli ambassador to India, Naor Gilon. We'll be playing that out later tonight, in which he also admitted, yes, it's a collapse, it's a failure, he said, and that too a failure that has happened for the first time in the last 50 years, since the Yom Kippur War. So the biggest message out here is of the intelligence failure and how the communication was blocked, how they had no idea about it. And the biggest talking point really is, Kartikeya, that Egypt had warned Israel that something is being planned by Hamas and Iran, that something seems to be underway. This has been widely reported by the Western press and the wires. And yet they say that there was some kind of an arrogance shown by the Israelis. Of course, these are classified records. This won't come out in public. Only Israel and Egypt know what happened behind closed doors. But if there was intelligence, was Israel overconfident? Did they not realize the capabilities that Hamas really had? Was there some kind of an airy calm that they couldn't figure out really? Because this is a massive intelligence failure, even though Israel now may be planning a ground assault inside Hamas, but Hamas has strong 20,000 fighters out there. It has massive funding coming in from perhaps Qatar and other countries. The Saudi is trying to politically motivate them and help them out from this entire trap. So as of now, Hamas is certainly very strong. They have proved their so-called mettle by this unfortunate terror attack, in which now I am told more than 1,200 Israeli citizens have died. Most of them, more than 1,000 of them, are civilians.
Okay, let me go to Major Don Pfefferman. Dan, am I audible to you?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Dan, these are the latest reports which say that sort of mistakes that were made. Now they're being reported concretely. So let me ask you one question. For Hamas to employ drones which not only jam the cellular network but destroy the automated system, you have been part of the idea. What sort of a technological capability is this that they could blind the entire control room? And this has been now reported by multiple agencies.
Yeah, I want to follow up on what the gentleman speaking before me said.
Aditya Raj Kaul, our executive editor.
Thank you very much. He said something very accurate, and that is there was an arrogance, there was a hubris, it seems now, on the part of the Israeli Defense Forces. There was years, now we're understanding this, of a misinformation campaign, psychological warfare employed in a very sophisticated manner by Hamas to sort of calm the Israeli decision makers and the Israeli military into thinking that Hamas was interested in stability and long-term quiet. And so all of the measures that were taken to secure that border the priority was not placed on that border like it should have been. The priority was placed on the northern border. The priority was placed in stopping actual terrorist attacks in and around the West Bank, and essentially buying the misinformation that Hamas was selling, in that it is not looking for war, it is not looking for escalation. With that, there was also a hubris and a growing reliance on technological and stationary and remote controlled security elements along that border. The smart fence, which had some lookout posts and it had some cameras in kind of these floating balloons that everyone can see. And Hamas, with Iranian support, was able to use fairly simple technologies that are now available really to everyone, and that's drone warfare, and some other sophisticated employment of simple technological means to overcome Israel's security and intelligence operation on the border. There was not enough redundancy. There was not enough manpower. They were not properly distributed. These are all things that have been now coming out over the last couple of days. And all of it stems from the two mistaken conceptions. When you work in the world of intelligence and security, you have to have a conceptual strategy, understanding what it is your enemy wants to achieve. And here, there was a failure to understand what Hamas essentially wants to achieve. There was what now we see as a gross underestimation of the capabilities of Hamas. They are not the ragtag terror group that they might have been 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. They clearly showed, at least on the level of the commanders and the strategists, those like Dave and Yahya Sinwar, that they are very adept at operational strategy. And they managed to pull a very successful surprise attack on what should be and is a much stronger military power.
Also, let me introduce our third guest, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me. My question to you is on the operational side, sir. This has been reported in NYT also, and I'm quoting the source, sir. It says the two of the officials said that the Israeli border surveillance system was almost entirely reliant on cameras, sensors, machine guns that operated remotely. Israeli commanders had grown overtly confident in the system's impregnability, though they thought that the combination of remote surveillance, arms, barriers above the ground, and a subterranean wall to block Hamas from digging tunnels into Israel made mass infiltration unlikely. The result was that, sir, 1,500 Hamas terrorists broke through 30 points and they overran the control room, sir. What does it teach us?
Kartikeya, thank you very much. You've heard Aditya, you've heard Dan. Let me tell you, it is definitely an intelligence failure. There's no denying the fact. Hamas has been seeing how the Israelis are reacting. If you see, the Hamas has been rather lying low, and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the PIJ, that have been continuously launching attacks on the Israelis. The Israelis have been taking on them. Even the last attack was on them. Hamas is observing, watching as to how are they reacting, what is being done, and there is no denying the fact that Iran's role is substantial. If funding has been done by Qatar, this technological support that Iran has offered to Hamas is something which is creditable. Reason is because they're observing how the tunnels are operating. They've seen what the fence is all about. They've seen the cyber attacks that have laid, how the Israelis are reacting to it. And they have also now noticed that within Israel, there is a little bit of a turmoil, and which can now be exploited. At the same time, they notice that there seems to be that Israel is looking for peace, and that peace is being I would say arbitration being done by USA, trying to bring Saudi Arabia closer to Israel. Chinese have, to their means, brought Saudi Arabia closer to Iran. So all these facilitators are working towards peace. Now that doesn't suit Hamas, because if it had suited Hamas, things would have been totally different. What is the Islamic resistance movement? Hamas is the Islamic resistance movement. If that be so, they are very clear from day one as to what is it that they want. Much that the countries in the world might want to look for peace, they aren't there for peace. They are there to eradicate Israel from this world. that if that is the aim that they're following, in that comes the context of Muhammad there. A man who's lost his family, a man who's part of the first intifada. The second intifada was when Ariel Sharon was the prime minister. A person who feels that Al-Aqsa Mosque is the one that seems to have been, where hurts their sentiments. It may or may not be, but they felt so. It happens in the time of Ramzan because that's a holy place for both the Muslims as also the Jews. If it is absolutely a sacred place for the Jews, it is as much a sacred place for the Muslims. So that's where the particular, I wouldn't say a fight, but a bit of a disagreement that can take place over there, which seems to be otherwise. Now at this point of time, Hamas thought if at any point of time anything, and Palestinians themselves, Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Okay.
That is what we must understand.
But
it's a terrorist organization.
Correct. So
Hezbollah. Hezbollah also a terrorist organization. So the Israelis are not fighting the Palestinians. They are fighting the terrorist organization.
There is no difference of opinion. But I would my question was on this: how they were able to overcome these automated systems. I think Aditya has a question for Dan.
I have an update first, Kartikeya. It's a big update. And that is that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has now discussed the formation and announced the formation of an emergency unity government with the former Defense Minister of Israel, Benny Gantz. It's a major development because they have been political rivals. These are political opposition and the government that is coming in. An emergency unity government is to be formed. I want to go to Dan directly on this big breaking update that we are as we discuss the crisis and the war. Dan, is this also perhaps a signal to what we'll witness in the coming days and weeks in Gaza? Because airstrikes have continued. Almost the territory has been secured. There could be some Hamas terrorists still in hiding, and that the IDF will deal with them. But could we now see, Dan, a ground assault as well? And not just the ruling government, the opposition completely in sync with the government coming together, showing a united Israel against Gaza, against Hamas.
And Dan, you can also take my question because Aditya asked you this question. Can you please explain also that how can they overcome cameras, sensors and machine guns which were operated remotely? How could that happen so successfully? If you can take both the questions, my question and Aditya's question.
Sure. I just got the news as well, Aditya, about the unity government formed, and we've been watching that. We've been watching that for the last few days come together with some tensions between former defense minister and chief of the military, Benny Gantz, and with him in his party, also former chief Gadi Eisenkot, who are going to be joining the cabinet, both two of the most senior military officers around today, with a lot of defense and military experience, will be joining the security cabinet, the war cabinet, as it's being put together. They were trying to put together over the last few days who would exactly be involved in the decision making, and more pointedly, who in the current cabinet would be left out of the decision making. Israeli society, with all the tensions and all the disagreements that we've had, especially over the last year, put everything aside, and everyone is coming together now in this time of crisis, in this time of war. And I think the decision-making process will be heavily enriched with these two former generals, both very respected and very cool-headed generals in the decision-making room. I don't know to say if it's a sign that there is a ground invasion to come or not. I think that is a big question mark of what exactly will be the Israeli military strategy now in regards to Gaza. A ground invasion is something that is immensely complex. It is not a matter of days, weeks. It could even be a matter of months. And we have to make sure that certainly the entire country is behind it. I think in such times of crisis, it's important to see and to say that all elements of Israeli society, from the far left Meretz supporters to the ultra-Orthodox, and many Israeli Arab citizens, are fully behind the government and fully united as a society, because this is a threat to absolutely everyone in this country, and not just to one, political party or another. To the second question, the nature of warfare today, and this is what I was trying to get at earlier. The nature of warfare today is that it is very possible to achieve certain military aims with simple technologies that are used effectively. And there is a sort of a drone revolution that is underway in military technology. They're not expensive. Some of them are off the shelf. Some of them are easily produced by countries like Iran or like China. Iran especially, who has been providing these kind of simple to use drones, for example, that the Russians are using in the war on Ukraine. And there's a lot that one can do with a drone against such border defenses. If, again, I repeat what I said earlier, if there is not enough redundancy on the border, and if the intelligence and security conception was one that Hamas is seeking stability, is not a threat, is not as capable as was thought, and therefore kind of given the Israeli security establishment looking away or not paying enough attention to the southern front, that is when using fairly simple but sophisticated employment of such means to take down momentarily the security barriers. We see that within 2-3 days. Yesterday it was announced by the Israeli government that the border has been resecured. I would guarantee that this kind of mistake will not happen again.
Okay, Aditya, before I go to the General Kulkarni, what should we pick up when we say emergency unity government has been formed? Does it stabilizes Netanyahu?
What we have witnessed over the last many months, in fact years I would say, is the political chaos in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, in Israel. There have been attacks on Benjamin Netanyahu. He was unseated, and then after many months he returned to power. But there have been over the last many months protests on the so-called judicial reforms that Benjamin Netanyahu and his justice minister were up to. It led to a fraction between the Israeli society, a divide within the society. Every Saturday evening there were massive mass protests that were underway in Israel. There were candlelight vigils that were organized, a lot of activists involved in it. And it completely divided the society, and people really had strong opinion on it. And what the government really wanted was to take the ultimate control from the judiciary to the executive. And this, people said, was authoritarianism and cannot be tolerated in a democratic society where different powers of the government and the executive and the judiciary are fairly divided. So this has been a massive a dividing point between the society, and the resources and the national security's entire burden has been diverted towards that as well, and that perhaps could have led to an intelligence failure, diversion of resources, security, etc. As you also rightly pointed out, that a lot of security was moved, IDF was moved from southern Israel to the West Bank as well.
Okay, now Aditya, General Kulkarni, Major Dan Pfefferman, I'll be taking about certain operational issues and I would like your insight onto it. We have discussed the political part, we have already discussed the Hamas. Now let me get into certain operational things. General, first I'll read it to you. The second operational failure was the clustering of leaders from Army's Gaza division in a single location along the border. Once the base was overrun, most of the senior officers were killed, injured or taken hostage, according to two Israeli officials. That is one part of it. And the second part, sir, is that it is reported that at one point time on the ground, the generals encountered by chance a commander from another brigade. There and then the two men decided on an ad hoc basis which villages their respective units would try to retake. Can you just tell us, how this is operationally wrong? Why would leaders of an army would be clustered in one base, sir? Can you just shed some light on this?
Kartikeya, what happens is, if you go back to Yom Kippur War, the same kind of surprise element that came up. Even now, because of the things in West Bank, the occupation of land, which was so perceived by the the Hezbollah, that a lot of occupation of the land was being done by the Israelis, eviction of things of that, and therefore the Israelis had to move in virtually about 33 battalion strength worth in West Bank to ensure that there was no law and order problem that comes up over there. Now in Gaza, after the second Intifada, you have almost everybody out, and you have 99% population in Gaza. That is 22 lakh people in Gaza who are, Muslims. That is the first thing. Secondly, it's an area which is about 365 square kilometers, density of population over 6,500 people per square kilometer, with only 11 kilometers of border with Egypt. And what you just said, that Egypt did convey to them that there were containers of gypsum. Now those containers of gypsum, when tried out, turned out to be ammonium nitrate. Now all these kind of things that were going on, but there was no input that was coming in from Gaza as to what is going on. So tunneling, all kinds of activities. Now it is much easier, the Iron Dome. Now when we talk of the Iron Dome, it's an expensive, very, very expensive system. So we get a swarm of rockets. We really have 5,000 to 7,000 rockets come to in 20 minutes. How many would they be able to take on? At any point of time, definitely not more than 50%. And each of the rocket taking on this ordinary rocket which is made in Gaza or even smuggled into Gaza is a very, very ordinary technology. So that ordinary technology is being taken on by a very sophisticated technology where every rocket to take on one rocket would cost you $80,000. And therefore, however much it may be, out of 7,000 rockets being fired in 20 minutes, you will have a large number, maybe even 50% of them landing in Israel. First. Second, 1,500 terrorists, 30 points to be activated. So again, swarm of terrorists taking on. Third, the kind of jamming which can be done by drones. Now, all this sophistication, somebody is obviously offered it to Hamas. Hamas has been able to activate all of it. And therefore, you find, and that thing is a festive. The festival season at that point of time, the guards down, complacency. The festival also does not allow them to touch electronic equipment. They're more on to having you saw how many 270 or 90 people being killed by Hamas as part of the dancing party. So the mood of the nation is totally different. It is off. So therefore, you found that for the first 24 hours, there is total paralysis in Israel. It's only after that that the Israelis have decided to retaliate, react, and thereafter, of course, Israel will win, but the win will come after having been given a total, rap on its knuckle in such a fashion that Israel themselves for centuries will not realize how on earth could such a surprise be attained by Hamas. Now jamming is available, swarming of the complete thing. So every electronic equipment has limitations. It cannot at any point of time. And then when you have jammed everything, you do not know from one command control to the other. There is no means of communicating from one to the other unless until you are on duty. Normally, whenever such festivals take place or whenever they say, what do we do? Well, if there are 10 people supposed to be on duty, there may be 2 on duty. But even if there are 2 on duty, they will be 24/7 on telephone. They will be communicating with one another, ensuring. Probably somewhere down the thing, they got complacent and they thought that the fencing is almost like not a bird can pass through. The complacency because of the fencing, probably because of the Iron Dome, which they thought could not be, all of this led to what has happened in Israel. Otherwise, there is no question that a country like Israel with Mossad and all, and imagine if the Five Eyes can tell you about what Niger is doing in Canada, can't the Five Eyes be able to tell the Israelis as to what is happening over there? Everything is possible. But when you are, even Mohammed there from 2021, that man is not seen. So therefore, the only way to stay out of this thing is to not to communicate with one another. It is only one-to-one, 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 they are moving. And so then there is no communication taking place, so there is no way you can pick up anything what is going on. So even that is dumb. So it's one-to-one human, and it's a small place like Gaza. It is not a huge place. So what 40 kilometers in length, 10 to 10 kilometers wide. You can walk across and find out the people exactly what they're doing. And all of one community are staying there. So everybody else is out. And Israel also, even though 1 crore population, you have 20% people who are not Jews. There are 18% people who are Arab Muslims or Christians for that matter. So there's a mix of all this which is happening, and a democratic like of culture which is setting into Israel also led to complacency and this kind of operational failure, which resulted in a total surprise and obviously losing 1,200 lives, another about 4,000 people injured is a huge setback to Israel. A country like Israel surrounded the enemies. 21 countries are in and around which are totally looking for eradication of Israel. Israel cannot let it guard down. I think this complacency has been very.
Dan, can you take this question which I had asked the general? How come the control rooms went blind? That was the question. And the second question, which I asked Dan was that, why wasn't the control from Tel Aviv active within 10 hours? How come the brigade commanders were taking their own decision?
Yeah, I wasn't on the ground, so it's hard to say. But these kinds of situations, and I'm sure the general knows how such situations work. At the end of the day, they're controlled by people. Oftentimes, people who are sitting in watch stations on the borders, in remote stations looking at the cameras, and then of course people sitting in the headquarters.
Let me reroute this question to you, Dan.
Yeah, please.
Israel, and Aditya, you too. Israel has a very sophisticated air systems. It has got sophisticated air force. When we talk about such operation, the report says, as a result, no one there sensed the immediate need for massive rapid air cover. So this could have been mobilized immediately. In your opinion, why air cover was not mobilized? Was it lack of situational awareness?
Yeah, that's what it seems to be the case, that there was a lack of situational awareness. Those on the border, what we're starting to uncover, those on the command posts and on the Gaza border areas were overwhelmed. Many of them were killed, at the outset of this invasion into Israel. And so they were not able to sound the alarm. And those who were able to sound the alarm, maybe there was such confusion at headquarters or at the Southern Command headquarters that it just took the Israeli military clearly hours to figure out what was going on, where was it happening. The scenario was in such contrast to what Israel could conceive that was happening, that I think it took people too long to get over the shock and understand that this was not another maybe small-scale infiltration, which happens from time to time, or firing of rockets, which happens much more frequently. But this was something on a massive scale, at 20 different points across the border, and they were rampaging from village to village, from base to base, and killing and massacring. And this is something that there clearly was a failure of command, of communications here, going all the way from those on the ground, many of whom were dead at this point or were fighting for their lives. And the different pieces of the picture, of the puzzle, were not put together nearly as fast as they should have been. And I think, humbly, all of this stems from not understanding the potential threat and being misled by Hamas for quite a long time to think that Hamas was interested in quiet, was not planning anything sort of this, and the underestimation of Hamas's capabilities, of course now we know bolstered by Iran, to be able to conduct such a large and such a sophisticated operation. This just caught completely off guard. It caught the idea.
Aditya, doesn't it remind you of 9/11? Even in India, twice. Once the hijacking took place when Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, and the second was in 2008. The ability to mobilize air asset was something which was not demonstrated. It landed, should NSG take over or not, and then, even then Air Force was not mobilized, and then the plane flew off, to Dubai. And in 2008, do you recall how much time did it take for the center to organize the commandos of the NSG to fly to Mumbai?
That's true. It reminds me of 26/11. It also reminds me of the IC-814 hijacking that happened years and years ago, almost 25 years ago, where the response time was, was horrific. And we had an opportunity during the IC-814 when the flight was in Amritsar. And, they were waiting for orders. And if the tire were punctured of that Air India flight, history would have been written differently, because Masood Azhar, the terrorist who was released at that particular time, led to the making of the Jaish-e-Mohammed that not only attacked Indian Parliament but went on to attack in Pulwama, in Uri, in Pathankot, and different major terror attacks that have happened in the last 10 to 20 years. So response time is certainly a challenge. But in this scenario, Kartikeya, what we have to understand is that one, of course, it's an intelligence failure, it's a massive collapse of the system. But comparing the size of the country and also the kind of barrage of rockets that have coming in from Gaza, nobody would have expected the kind of magnitude and the scale of this terrorist attack. You know, when the initial figures were coming in, Kartikeya, I was monitoring it since about 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. in the morning on Saturday. It was said that 50 terrorists are there. Then the number went to 100 to 200 terrorists are there.
1,500.
Imagine.
Aditya, 1,500 from 30 points.
Imagine, it is only on Monday that we finally realized that the number is 1,500 from not 1, not 2, not 11, not 22, but 30 different locations they have intruded. They have used air, land, water. So the magnitude and the scale of this terrorist attack has never seen before. It was a massive intrusion. It was early in the morning when people mostly were asleep. The reaction time was slow, and in my interaction with the Israeli IDF and diplomats, I have been told that the first responders were the special forces, because they are not only situated in different strategic locations, even if they are at home, they are always prepared to respond. So once they got a text message or a phone call that something was wrong, they immediately headed out. So the maximum casualties that the IDF has also faced, unfortunately, is of the special forces that reacted first. This is just minutes ago that I've learned from the IDF, unfortunately. And there are, of course, senior responders, including colonels and lieutenant colonels, who have unfortunately laid down their life and sacrifice. So the scale and magnitude was so horrific that nobody could have reacted the way one would have expected, that we will have airstrikes or immediately flag off Navy ships as well as ground troops. Everything takes time, and if they had some kind of an intelligence of this scale, I'm sure they would have been prepared. But I'm sure, unfortunately, they were caught napping, or perhaps did not act on the kind of intelligence they had. And unfortunately, I don't want to say it, but have to say it, that in Gaza, Hamas really has been successful in this terrorist attack, and whatever their achievement would have been to create an international debate or a stir around it or even condemnation, they have unfortunately achieved it.
I think, General Kulkarni, it's also about unexpected. I'm not saying this is India's Kargil, which Israel has undergone, because I would say that this is much bigger than that. But the fact is that even during Kargil, the Pakistani forces stayed during the winter, which was unexpected. These people came with the gliders right in front of you in the open eye, when the system thought that they would be coming out like rats from the tunnels. They were out in the open, it's like asymmetrical warfare, isn't it?
Kartikeya, what happens is, all said and done, whenever you have this kind of, they're below radars. Now they are flying at such a system that the radars won't pick up these hand gliders, these small little drones. They'll be all off radar. So the radars are not working. First, you must understand that it is a festive time. So therefore, there is a little complacency that is for. Secondly, they are not expecting Hamas to do. Even if there was a slightest input, such a thing would not have happened. So there is a total lull, complacency, because there is kind of a feeling that Israel is going in for a kind of a, not appeasement, I would say, but kind of a deal with Hamas to have peace in that area. But this thing, Palestinian Islamic Jihad is fighting with. So the Hamas has gone off the radar. So everybody is not looking at Hamas, everybody is looking at the PIJ, and for their actions is what's happening. And Hamas at the same time is working underground quietly, peacefully. Therefore, it's very important, never ever, for even the smallest and the slightest, ever underestimate your enemy. Hamas did exactly that. I'll give you a small example, Kartikeya, if you don't mind. 1947. 1,500 raiders came in a place called Badgam, which is not far from Srinagar, where Major Somnath Sharma was the first PVC. All those 1,500 raiders that were in and around Badgam were being seen as a party, a marriage party. Everyone told them it's a marriage party which is coming there, and therefore when they checked up as to why are these people gathering, oh, the villagers said a marriage party, not to worry. What were they? They were not marriage parties. In the kaftan that they were having, they all had weapons. And then suddenly this marriage party turns into an attacking on this company, which led to saving Srinagar that we have it till date. And this company able to eliminate that particular thing. So this kind of a surprise, if you think it's a marriage party, you find band, baj raha hai, ye ho raha hai. So it's okay. But they were not for marriage party, they were raiders. Similarly, in this case, nobody expected. The Israelis never expected. That is why the tanks were not even occupied. The crew was outside the tank. The command and control of elsewhere somewhere. And 1,500 terrorists, 30 points. Each one of them wanted to. Within 20 minutes, it's all over. The swarm of rockets that are fired, 7,000 of them in 20 minutes. Most of them, the Iron Dome, by the time it realized.
So, are you saying that the rocket fire, are you saying, General, that the rocket fire completely distracted the Israeli system while their 1,500 fighters ran amok in the southern villages?
Absolutely, Kartikeya. It's land, sea, air. You have drones, you have hand gliders, you have people on motorcycles, you have all kinds of unorthodox means. You have dozers which are coming and hitting to your, what we thought was invincible fencing which has been done by the Iron Dome, which they thought can nothing, not even a bird can. What happened? 7,000 of them. If the rockets are fired in 20 minutes, even the Iron Dome wouldn't know which side to look at what's happening and where it is. And within that short time of time, these people have already, what is the 40 kilometers, as I told you, 10 to 12 kilometers in width. And from there, what is Gaza? It's not even a kilometer from there. They can just swag. And by the time the festive mood, all this is over, it's all gone. So this is the surprise. This is something which the Israelis never expected. Hamas, who they thought they could negotiate for a peaceful agreement, it turned out to be the other way around. And then there were people like Mohammed there who have been hurt. Their families have been wiped out. They're totally radicalized, totally into wanting to take a revenge. That is where they are for, and that is what they did it. And that is where I think we as Indians also need to learn a lesson. They're surrounded by enemies within and outside, and therefore 24/7, 365 days, vigilance is a must. Eyes and ears have to be open. You cannot underestimate the enemy. You cannot get complacent.
This brings me to another question, and this is more on the I would say not political, sociological side. Aditya, one, is this the Al-Qaeda movement where Hamas, with the way Americans went after Al-Qaeda, killed them? But once Al-Qaeda was done, you had ISIS, far more radicalized. What do you expect with Hamas and post-Hamas scenario? Because ultimately, radicalization is an opinion, it's a thought process. It finds a stage somewhere.
Firstly, yes, there is no doubt about it. It is the Al-Qaeda moment. It is the 9/11 moment. Even though I don't believe in comparing terror attacks, but unfortunately it is the 9/11 moment for Israel. And there is no doubt in my mind, Kartikeya, that Israel is going after Hamas like never before. They will be not just trying to eliminate their infrastructure, but all their capability to have any such terror attack in future. At least from Gaza, I don't think that is going to happen. What we should also remember is that one cannot completely eliminate. Like you rightly pointed out, radicalization is a phenomena that is ongoing. In Kashmir, we might have done Article 370 abrogation. We might have killed and eliminated the leadership of Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Toiba. That doesn't mean that a small, minuscule part of the population won't be radicalized. That will continue. But Israel will try its best to eradicate their infrastructure, their ammunition dumps, and key leadership of the Hamas will be completely wiped out. When the US went inside Afghanistan after Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, they had this great aim and imagination of not just targeting Osama and Al-Qaeda and their leadership, but of restoring some kind of order in Afghanistan. They wanted to, without understanding the tribal system there, the different communities and ethnicities, US had this huge democratic concept of making Afghanis understand. I think hubris is
the word, not democratic. Hubris.
Yeah. They failed. I mean, who wouldn't, remember those images of aircrafts and Air Force,
Aditya, I
leaving.
remember I went to Afghanistan in 2003. The special forces were there. They took me to Ghazni. They took me to the various areas, and they said Afghanistan is being modernized. But only thing what was happening was pilfering away of the defense funds, pilfering away of the civil funds. Half of them were going to warlord, farmer Taliban guys were becoming the governors of various states. But I think that the mindset didn't change, and ultimately in 20 years down the line, you had Taliban.
So my point being that Israel doesn't believe in that concept.
Correct.
Israel is not going to restore some kind of order in Gaza or have their own government in place or fund that. Israel is going to wipe out Hamas and send a message to the Middle East that if there is terrorism, there will be no rules of war for Israel.
I think there's no doubt about it that what has happened in Israel is unprecedented. And I think the sort of action which we are going to witness, which is primarily Gaza, is also going to be unprecedented. Gaza is expected not just to be bombed, in context of terror hideouts, but I think what will happen is that the Gaza will eventually be overrun and Gaza will be taken over by the Israelis after 1967. They vacated in 2005. They will have to run it, and it's going to be a different challenge and a different ball game.
China won't let us rest easy on our borders, but they will keep flooding our markets. What does Xi Jinping really want?
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it. It's really a matter of showing their dominance.
India's great Chinese conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.
Frenemy